the name and identity of any American national. So for instance, if there is a report about a foreign spy, they would say that the spy spoke with person A, and person A is actually an American national with his identity redacted. But high-level government officials can ask the NSA to unmask these American nationals in order to see who they actually are. And we know through this unclassified document that Michael Flynn had his name redacted 48 times, just in the 3-month period between November 2016 and January 2017. Now, is this illegal? It's actually not. Even though most people don't know about it, unmasking is a fairly common practice. But according to William Barr, because of the large number of unmaskings of Michael Flynn, as well as the fact that some of these unmaskings did not appear to have been in the line of normal business, he actually assigned a U.S. attorney, John Bash of Texas, to investigate this issue. That was 2 months ago, back in May, so we'll have to wait and see what he actually finds out. But if you'd like a roadmap of what we know thus far, then take a look at this. The FISA abuse infographic poster put out by the Epic Times. This thing is huge. It's 3 feet by 4 feet. It took our investigative journalists several months to put together, and it is a timeline that details, step by step, how in their rush to set up surveillance on a former Trump campaign advisor, the FBI relied on politicized information, consistently ignored exculpatory evidence, and misled the FISA court in order to spy on Carter Page. This is awesome. We looked under every rock and every available source of information. We just let the facts guide us wherever they may, and this is what we came up with. And now you can get this poster delivered to your home, absolutely free of charge. You don't even need to pay the cost of shipping. Just click on that button below and try the Epic Times newspaper for a full month for just $1, and we'll send you this poster absolutely free of charge. That way, not only can you stay up to date on all of the developments as they're happening with a news source that doesn't spin the facts, doesn't have any hidden agendas, and doesn't push any false narratives, but you can also hang this poster up, study it yourself, share it with your friends and family, and get a blueprint of everything we know thus far. We deliver to all 50 states, so no matter where you live, you can get honest journalism delivered straight to your doorstep. Just click on that button below.
The FBI commenced this investigation based on information by the FBI indicating that the primary subsource may be a threat to national security. Specifically, the FBI received reporting indicating a research fellow for an influential foreign policy advisor in the Obama administration was at a work-related event in late 2008 with a coworker when they were approached by another employee of the think tank. The employee reportedly indicated that if the two individuals at the table did get a job in the government and had access to classified information and wanted to make a little extra money, the employee knew some people to whom they could speak. The coworker did express suspicion of the employee and had questioned the possibility the employee might actually be a Russian spy. In December 2016, the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane investigation identified the employee as Christopher Steele's primary subsource. So in other words, the intelligence community knew full well that this guy was full of crap, and then they proceeded to use this as the basis for launching the investigation into Carter Page, among others. According to this documentation, in September 2006, the primary subsource was in contact with a known Russian intelligence officer. In 2005, the subsource was making contact with a Washington, D.C.-based Russian officer. One individual indicated the primary subsource was not anti-American, but wanted to return to Russia one day. Another described the primary subsource as pro-Russia, indicated that he or she always interjected Russian opinions during foreign policy discussions. So the timeline of December 2016 is when they knew that that basically the Steele dossier was nonsense. They promulgated it anyway. They announced it to Trump, and then all of a sudden it finds its way into the press. All of which suggests that this was an attempt to subvert the incoming Trump administration at the very, very least. And now there are text messages that have been emerging from the FBI detailing the quote-unquote internal furor over the handling of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. This is according to The Federalist. Sean Davis and Molly Hemingway reporting. FBI agents tasked by fired former director James Comey to take down Donald Trump during and after the 2016 election were so concerned about the agency's potentially illegal behavior that they purchased liability insurance to protect themselves less than 2 weeks before Trump was inaugurated president. Previously hidden FBI text messages show the explosive new communications and internal FBI notes were disclosed in federal court filings today from Sidney Powell, the attorney who heads Michael Flynn's legal defense team. We all went and purchased professional liability insurance, one agent texted on January 10th, 2017, the same day CNN leaked details that then President-elect Trump had been briefed by Comey about the bogus Christopher Steele dossier. That briefing of Trump was used as a pretext to legitimize the debunked dossier, which was funded by the DNC and the Clinton campaign and compiled by a foreign intelligence officer who was working for a sanctioned Russian oligarch. Holy crap, an agent responded. All the analysts too? Yep, the first agent said. All the folks at the agency as well. Can I ask who are the most likely litigators? An agent responded. As far as potentially suing y'all? Haha, who knows? I think the concern when we got it was that there was a big leak at DOJ and the New York Times, among others, was going to do a piece. While the names of the agents responsible for the text are redacted, the legal filing from Powell, quoting communications from the DOJ, states the latest document production included handwritten notes and text from Peter Strzok, who led up all of these investigations, Andrew McCabe, Lisa Page, and FBI analysts who worked on the FBI's investigation of Flynn. Agents also said they were worried about how a new attorney general might view the actions taken against Trump during the investigation. The new AG might have some questions. Then we all get screwed, one agent wrote. FBI agents also discussed how the investigation's leadership was consumed with conspiracy theories rather than evidence. I'm telling you, man, if this thing ever gets FOIA'd, there are going to be some tough questions asked, one agent wrote, and a great deal of those will be related to Brian having a scope way outside the boundaries of logic. Redacted, so they took out the name, is one of the worst offenders of the rabbit holes in conspiracy theories. The guy traveled with that guy, who put down the third guy as his visa sponsor. Third guy lives near a Navy base. Therefore, several texts show the order to close the criminal investigation against Michael Flynn came as early as November 8th, 2016, the same day as the 2016 presidential election. It was later reopened in early January of 2017 on the thin read that it was a Logan Act violation for Mike Flynn to be talking with the Russians when in fact it was not. We have some loose ends to tie up. We all need to meet to discuss what to do with each case. One agent texted referring to the operation called Crossfire Razor, which was the FBI's code name for the investigation of Michael Flynn. The new disclosures made by the DOJ also show the FBI used so-called national security letters to spy on Michael Flynn's finances. Unlike traditional subpoenas, which do require judicial review and approval before authorities can seize an innocent person's property and information, NSLs are never independently reviewed by courts. One of the agents noted in a text message that these particular form of surveillance were just being used as a pretext by the FBI leadership to buy time to find dirt on Flynn after the first investigation of him yielded no derogatory information. The decision to NSL finances for Razor bought him time, one agent said 2 weeks after the initial order to shut down the anti-Flynn case. What do we expect to get from an NSL? An agent texted on December 5th, 2016. We put out traces, tripwires to community, nothing. Bingo, another agent responded. So what's an NSL going to do? No content. Haha, this is a nightmare, an agent said. So a lot of the agents were deeply suspicious that all of this was basically bullcrap, and as it turns out, it was in fact bullcrap. And these agents were deeply upset at the fact that the agency was now being used as a way to launder anti-Trump intel into the public or to target President Trump. On January 5th, they could not believe that the intel report was going to stay open. Razor's going to stay open, an agent wrote on January 5th. Yep, another FBI agent responded. Crimes report being drafted. F, the first agent wrote back. What's the word on how the Obama briefing went? One agent asked, referring to a January 5th meeting between James Comey and Barack Obama. Don't know, but people here are scrambling for information to support certain things. It's a madhouse, an FBI agent responded. Jesus, an agent wrote back. Trump was right. Still not put together. Why do we do this to ourselves? What is wrong with these people? So, all of this is obviously deeply disturbing and undermines fundamental institutions of the American Republic. Kimberly Strassel has a good thread on this over at the Wall Street Journal. She says, breaking, per Catherine Herridge, and extraordinary. So Christopher Steele's main source for the dossier, he was the subject of a nearly 2-year-long FBI counter-intel investigation under suspicion of being a Russian spy and a threat to national security. Early in the Obama administration, the subsource reportedly attempted to recruit 2 individuals connected to an influential foreign policy advisor to Obama. Said if they got jobs in the administration and access to classified info, he could help them make a little money. FBI says he had previous contact with the Russian embassy and Russian intelligence officers. Thanks to Paul Sperry, we know the name of this subsource and that he, for a period at this time, was at Brookings, a Democratic think tank. Here's the real kicker. The FBI knew about this prior CIA investigation into the source in December of 2016. It knew it was relying on information from a suspected Russian spy. The same FBI said to be concerned about Russian interference in the election was using information from a suspected Russian spy to probe a presidential campaign. The same FBI claiming Carter Page was a Russian agent was making that case based on info from a suspected Russian agent. Most importantly, it never told the FISA court about this CIA investigation. It withheld that information. It continued re-upping its applications to surveil Carter Page on the campaign. It vouched for information supplied by a suspected Russian agent. The name of the subsource, the realization of the FBI's prior suspicions, should have ended the entire probe. Instead, the FBI doubled down, hid things from the court, and kept going. This again raises urgent need to know who knew what and when. And people wonder why John Durham is looking into all of this. Also, extra credit question. Wasn't it Mueller's job to find sources of Russian disinformation? How do you miss the guy potentially feeding it directly to the FBI? And the fact that this went as far as it did is an astonishing breach of the nation's ability to trust its intelligence community. And I've been very skeptical of a lot of the criticisms made of the intelligence community. I didn't like it when President Trump talked badly of the intelligence community. I thought that he painted with too broad a brush at the very least. But it is perfectly obvious there were actors inside the FBI who were engaged in bad activity in order to target President Trump and his campaign. It is perfectly obvious at this point that that was what was going on. And I think we're going to find out some more damning info as the Durham investigation makes its way forward through the DOJ. Okay, in just a second, we're going to get to the continuation of violence across the country, actually, over the death of Breonna Taylor and the exoneration of the officers in that case, except for one officer who is charged with wanton discharge of a firearm. We'll get to that in just 1 second. First, let's talk about the fact that you definitely need to have the best employees working for you. Let's say you have a wonderful new producer. Let's call her Rebecca. And let's say she's just terrific. There's only one problem. She brings up topics to talk about 35 seconds before the show, which is not ideal because you usually need more than 35 seconds to research the topics. In every way, she's wonderful, except for that way. So let's say that you need another employee to do it correctly. Well, then you would need to check out ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter will send your job to over 100 of the web's leading job sites. But they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and then actively invites them to apply to your job. ZipRecruiter makes hiring efficient and effective with features like screening questions to filter candidates and an all-in-one dashboard where you can review and rate your candidates. ZipRecruiter, in fact, is so effective that 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the very first day. Right now, to try ZipRecruiter for free, my listeners can go to ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. This is great if you're an employee looking for an employer or the other way around. That's ZipRecruiter.com/DAILYWIRE. Try ZipRecruiter for free by going to ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter is indeed the smartest way to hire. Alrighty, so the chaos continued across the country. Every time there is a controversial race case in which the media completely ignore the underlying facts in order to achieve what they want to achieve, which is further racial conflagration, further racial tension, this stuff breaks out every single time. And it's going to continue this way. I do not think it's going to end if Joe Biden becomes president, because who exactly is going to be sanguine about the octogenarian, barely awake, longtime senator who did nothing, making sure that all racial tensions in the country are quelled? Also, the Democratic Party and the media have set a goal that is unobtainable. It is just not there. It's not, you can't get to it. That goal is the end of all racism whatsoever. And not just the goal to end all racism, but the goal to end all situations in which racism could possibly be attributed to the situation, even if there's no racism evident from the situation. There's still no evidence that, number one, Breonna Taylor was shot on purpose. Number two, that Breonna Taylor was shot because she was black. And there's no evidence this had anything to do with racism. It doesn't matter. It's seen as an element of the racist justice system, the racist policing system. The predictable result of all of this is the insanity that we have been seeing in our cities. And again, I think that you are going to see such flight from urban centers. I think it's going to be as bad as it was in the 1970s when the crime rates really began to spike. And it's because of incidents like this. So we currently live in Los Angeles, not for long. And one of the reasons that we do not want to live in Los Angeles is because of incidents like this. So yesterday, down in Hollywood, last night, there were protests over Breonna Taylor. About 350 people apparently showed up at these protests. And cars were attempting to get through because these are public streets. There are no permits taken out for these protests. You know, you can see the spray paint on the sidewalks and in the middle of the street and all this. And you can see a huge crowd of people who are gathered in the middle of the street, again, protesting in the middle of a pandemic without any permit or anything else. But, you know, this is all good because we need this moment of racial reckoning, as Joe Biden has suggested. And what you'll see is a person in a white Prius simply trying to get through. This is obviously not somebody who's attempting to harm members of the crowd. This is a person who's probably trying to get home. Okay, this is not somebody who's ramming their car deliberately into protesters or anything like this. You can see they're driving very slowly, just trying to get through. They're driving maybe 5 miles an hour, really slowly. And then once they get through, then they take off in the car, right? Then they start hitting the gas. They haven't hit anybody. The crowd starts chasing them. And then you will see this helicopter footage. You'll see a truck filled with looters who cut the guy off.
Pretty much boxed in.
They box him in. A Mustang approaches from behind, and he tries to back up. The Mustang blocks him, and they start beating the crap out of this person. Somebody reaches through the driver's side window, apparently grabbing the steering wheel. People start taking flagpoles and bicycles and smashing windows. Somebody takes a skateboard and smashes the front windshield of the car. And then the Prius takes off down the street. Okay, so the Prius didn't injure anybody. These people were trying to harm the driver inside. They were trying to beat the crap out of the car for the great sin of the person trying to get home. So what ends up happening? The police pull the driver over and force the driver to get out of his car with his hands raised. This is why people are going to leave cities. Because it turns out that when you refuse to allow the police to enforce the law, you know how you could have enforced the law here? Large gatherings in the middle of a pandemic without a public permit should not be allowed. How is it that you can lock, I'm not kidding you, tens of millions of people across the country in their homes during a lockdown? But the minute there's a protest in the street of 350 people in LA, you're not allowed to break up the protest, even as they take over public property and threaten people's lives and property. How? How? And the answer is because you back the movement, because you're kind of okay with what's going on. That is the only reason. Because if you weren't okay with what was going on, you would stop it. Meanwhile, Louisville turned into a hotbed last night again. Andy Ngo was on the ground in Louisville, and he got some tape of people performing acts of looting again in Louisville. So that was just wonderful. There was also my friend Ami Horowitz, friend of the show. Ami Horowitz showed up in Louisville, and he was shouted at, and he was intimidated into putting down his camera. These are all folks who care deeply about civil rights to the point where they tell you literally are not allowed to tape them in a public place as they commit acts of violence. The good news is that our Democratic leadership is really talking these things down. I mean, they're really trying to calm the waters here. So Kamala Harris, the vice presidential candidate who's gone about as missing as it is possible for a VP candidate to go, she, along with Biden, are just hiding in the bunker. So Biden, I believe, called another lid today, which means that he has now been absent from the campaign trail like 10 of the last 13 days. And the media are like, oh, he's probably prepping for debate. It doesn't take 13 days to prep for debate. And he's not prepping for debate. He's just hiding in the basement, hoping that Donald Trump's innate unpopularity with the American people lets Joe Biden sort of coast into office without having to get off his gurney. In any case, Kamala Harris tweeted out, Black Americans don't need to be reminded that inequity runs deep in our country. It's a painful reality every day. We will only begin to fully heal when our nation addresses the systemic racism in our laws, policies, and institutions. Joe Biden and I have a plan to do just that. No, you don't. No, you don't. And she tweeted out, keep speaking Breonna Taylor's name. Okay, again, Breonna Taylor was the victim of a tragedy. Breonna Taylor was not the victim of a crime. End of story. When you say, keep saying Breonna Taylor's name, what exactly about saying Breonna Taylor's name is going to be effective in effectuating change that will be useful? It's one thing if you're talking about revising some of the laws regarding no-knock warrants, although in this particular case, if they'd actually effectuated the no-knock warrant, Breonna Taylor might well be alive. The problem was that they knocked, and then they announced themselves, and then that allowed her boyfriend, Walker, to get up out of bed, grab a gun, and then shoot at the door, which is what caused the entire crossfire situation to happen. But beyond that, if you're talking about the horrors of the Breonna Taylor situation, the suggestion tacitly and implicitly there is that the police were in the wrong and that the police should have been prosecuted in the killing of Breonna Taylor, which again, there is no legal evidence to back this idea. It does not mesh with reality. It simply does not. It has not for months. Everybody who has studied this case and is honest about it knows that. There are certain cases where charges are warranted. Ahmaud Arbery. There are cases where certain charges are not warranted. Breonna Taylor is one of those cases. Hey, but when she says that we have a plan to end systemic racism, no, you don't. The entire use of the term systemic racism means that there is no plan. There is no way to end systemic racism except to tear down systems. That's why the term systemic racism includes the word systemic. If your plan to end systemic racism does not include tearing down systems, it in fact is about you being elected in order to run those systems, then you're not ending systemic racism, you are perpetuating systemic racism. And herein lies the problem, as I've been pointing out for a long time here. The chief proponents of so-called institutional or systemic racism suggest that the way you can tell systemic or institutional racism exists is by disparate impact, is by looking at the outcome of a particular law, and if it does not affect all communities equally, statistically speaking, it is a racist law and must be ended, or it's a racist system and must be torn down. Well, once you say systemic racism, and then you say, I have a plan to end it, unless you are tearing down the system, you do not have a plan to end it, you want to be part of the system. You are part of the problem. You're upholding the system. You're serving the system. This is why it is not a leap from Black Lives Matter movement systemic racism arguments to defund the police. Because reforming the police is not in the cards. You're still reforming a system that is fundamentally based on slave catching, according to people like Ta-Nehisi Coates. So it does not matter. whether you want to correct small ills. Small ills aren't the problem. The entire system is to blame. When Kamala Harris says systemic racism, what she means is, I'm speaking your language, but I'm not going to actually do what I say I'm going to do. I'm just going to hold out there the prospect that you're going to be able to tear down the system if you elect people like me. It's truly radical and it's truly ugly. Then, of course, you have Kamala Harris saying violence isn't the answer. And so she tweeted that out last night as well. She said that violence isn't... This is what she tweeted. She said, Joe Biden and I are keeping the police officers who were shot in Louisville in our hearts, wishing them a swift and speedy recovery. Violence is not the answer. We must find a way to express our grief, anger, and demands in ways that reflect the world we wish to see. Okay, two thoughts that are not really easily held at the same time. Thought number one, the entire system is racist. Thought number two, attempts to destroy the system through use of violence are bad. Okay, especially when your alternative is what? You're going to vote for these longtime politicians, including this former prosecutor, Kamala Harris? You can't have it both ways. If the system is worthy of being torn down, it's worthy of being torn down. And that means the people who serve the system are the bad guys. You can't say all cops are good people, or most cops are good people, but really they are brown-shirted servants of a systemically racist system. That argument does not wash. And I think people inherently know that argument doesn't wash, which is why you are seeing all of this violence in the streets. And meanwhile, as we will see, the Trump administration is taking a different tack. We'll get to that in just 1 second. First, let me ask you something. What if there was someone out there who kept a log of every single thing you did, every minute of the day? I'm not talking about Sting. I'm not talking about Santa Claus. I'm not talking about God. I'm talking about your ISP. Your ISP is keeping track of everything that you do because they want to monetize everything you do online. Your internet provider, like AT&T or Comcast, is allowed to store logs of every website you've ever visited. They can legally sell the data to anyone, which is why I always use ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN reroutes your internet connection through their secure servers so your internet provider can't see or log what you do online. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, if I'm routing all my data through a VPN, doesn't that mean that the VPN can see what I'm doing and log my data instead? You have a right to ask this question. This is an excellent question. But here's the good news. ExpressVPN uses trusted server technology. They were the first major VPN provider to engineer all of their VPN servers to run in RAM, which makes it impossible for their VPN servers to store any data, including logs of any VPN customer. You don't have to take my or ExpressVPN's word for it. ExpressVPN is so confident in their no-logs claim, they even had one of the biggest assurance firms, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, audit their technology. You need to protect your data. ExpressVPN can help you do it right now. Visit expressvpn.com/Ben right now. Find out how you can get 3 months for free. That's expressvpn.com/Ben, expressvpn.com/Ben to learn more. Alrighty, so the Trump administration is taking a bit of a different tack here. And that tack is that we are going to defend law enforcement. So Vice President Mike Pence said this yesterday. He said, our angle here is that law enforcement is good, which seems like it should be fairly inarguable since there is one tried and true solution to crime, and that is more police officers. Here is Vice President Pence.
In the first 3 years of this administration, we've been supporting law enforcement at every level. 4,000 police officers funded through the COPS program. We broke records working with state and local law enforcement for prosecutions in violent crime and firearm prosecutions. Violent crime was steadily dropping to historic lows from a time in the previous 8 years that saw violent crime on the rise.
Okay, he is right about all of this. Okay, the Trump administration also sent forth Kayleigh McEnany to point out the media have been fostering violence. Now, this does not mean that if you say things that are bad ideologically, you are responsible for the violence. It does mean that if we are going to have this argument, which we repeatedly have, about turning up the climate of hostility in the country and making excuses for people who do bad things, that is a fair conversation to have. I've said this 1,000 times. I don't blame Barack Obama for 6 police officers being shot in Dallas in 2016. I don't blame Bernie Sanders for James Hodgkinson shooting a bunch of people at a congressional baseball game, right? Bernie Sanders didn't call for that. Barack Obama didn't call for that. I do blame them for raising the temperature by suggesting that their political opponents are the root of all evil and need to be destroyed. But Kayleigh McEnany makes the same point about Breonna Keeler from CNN, who's been making excuses for the rioters and looters over on CNN, apparently. Here's Kayleigh McEnany.
CNN's Breonna Keeler, who said, I question the judgment of the Kentucky Attorney General saying that mob justice is not justice. We know that this is very loaded language. That's an appalling statement from Breonna.